Hi everyone, welcome to a beautiful day. My name, of course, is Dr. Julie Two Moon, and I wanted to stop in here today and have a little discussion about thyroid that I think is sorely needed and quite honestly being missed most of the world. So I think it's fair to say that most women who are over 40 actually have some degree of a thyroid problem. And I think it can vary from frank hypothyroidism to subclinical hypothyroid to small issues that are just borderline, meaning there's stress in the system. And then, of course, we can go all the way out to include autoimmune conditions. And it's no accident that we have a glut of thyroid problems. It's pervasive for a reason. And that main reason is that, the thyroid is one of the primary energy generating systems in the body. When the thyroid works the way it's supposed to, it initiates the Krebs cycle, the energy production cycle in the cell, the primary, the best energy production cycle in the cell. When it isn't working, then that cycle doesn't run very efficiently, and we have a whole host of inflammatory problems that come downstream from that. And so on the whole, if this system can't do its job, you're going to have failure to provide significant energy in pretty much every system. So we're talking metabolically, you're not going to be very efficient at making energy, burning energy. But you guys, it gets really serious when we start talking about the impacts on our brain. In fact, a lack of thyroid perfusion in the brain is referred to as cold brain syndrome, which is exactly what people with cognitive decline as they age are experiencing. So you can see there that it becomes big pretty quick, right? And then we start talking about glucose regulation issues. Thyroid is implicated in all arthritis. It's implicated in all cancer. It's implicated in every autoimmune disease. It's implicated in every gut illness. It's implicated in every pain syndrome, migraines, depression, anxiety, high blood pressure, heart disease. In fact, back years ago, in doctors' practices who used a different model of thyroid management, when they effectively treated thyroid, their cases of heart attack disappeared. Their clinical practices no longer had a case of heart attack. Imagine that. Imagine if we've had significant potential for stopping this massive event in people's health lives, and we've been ignoring it because it's not the standard of care. Now, this is the big problem. Years ago, it was estimated that upwards of potentially 30 to 50% of the population was actually hypothyroid. Now, they assume about 3%. This is a huge disparity. And you know what changed? Our health didn't change. The parameters for diagnosis changed. So unfortunately, we went from a model where we were clearly diagnosing that we had a huge problem, and they were seeing that effective treatment took away risk of heart attack. And we moved to a system where 3% of the population qualifies as hypothyroid. And guess what? Our risk and evidence for heart attack is going up, as is autoimmune disease, diabetes, cancer, arthritis, pain syndromes. The writing is on the wall and it's very clear. Now, why do so many people miss it? Well, here's the deal, you guys. The thyroid is a complex system. Most of the time you go to your doc and they're going to check your TSH, and then they're going to tell you it's fine. Because one of the reasons why is that the range is so gosh darn wide. The range goes from like 0 to 5 in a lot of labs. And yet, clinically, it's been shown that survival rate from chronic disease is vastly improved with a TSH at 1 or below. Meaning, in most cases, nobody's going to get diagnosed effectively and treated effectively for hypothyroidism. Now, many doctors will simply test that. And guess what? Most of the time, insurance won't allow them to test more. Now, the few that will test more might test T3, reverse T3, T4. But there's a failure there too, because just because the thyroid has made enough hormone does not mean the hormone is active at the cell. And this is a big, big, big disparity. But most of the time, if those values come back relatively normal, people quantify it as like you don't have a thyroid problem. We won't even take into account right now if your antibodies are also elevated and therefore you have Hashimoto's, and the fact that you can have Hashimoto's without those antibodies elevated. But let's just talk about base thyroid function. So let's say, you're one of those people, you've been to the doctor says, no, it's fine. let me cover what you can know for certain you have a thyroid condition with. If you've got a history of constipation, I guarantee you have a thyroid problem. History of migraines, history of insomnia, anxiety, depression, high blood pressure, high cholesterol. If you have a family history of heart disease, I guarantee you hypothyroidism is in your picture. If you have arthritis, if you have chronic pain, if you have a history of cancer, if you have fatigue, I guarantee all of those things mean you have a thyroid problem. Now, it is not always as easy as just going, okay, you have a thyroid problem. And I'm going to cover that in a minute. But one of the ways you might clue yourself in is just take your daily take your body temperature. I can tell you that, and there's more to this, but generally, if your body temperature is below 98.6, you have a thyroid problem. I say there's more to it because if you are running on stress hormones, it can inadvertently raise your body temperature. So then you think your body temperature is normal, but really you're just running on adrenaline, and that adrenaline is raising your body temperature artificially. Those symptoms still really matter. So along the way, it gets missed because despite having those symptoms, weight gain goes in there too. So despite having those symptoms, people go to the doctor runs the classic test, tells you it's all normal, so they can't do anything because quite honestly, like MDs, a lot of them, their licensure would prohibit them from treating you if they didn't have adequate clinical evidence for it, especially if your insurance is footing the bill. But there's a lot of steps in thyroid that just aren't referenced by that lab. So let's take a look at those. There's the step of is the pituitary signaling the thyroid. Okay, that's the TSH. That's what everybody checks, right? So if the pituitary is signaling and there's enough TSH, they call it good. And if there's too little, like down at like 0.5 or below, they tell you you're probably hyperthyroid. Now, the TSH is just a measure of the pituitary signaling. So now, once the pituitary signals, the gland has to make hormone. So in some cases, the gland doesn't make hormone. In other cases, it makes hormone and the hormone never leaves the gland. So now we've got this other issue. And this is a big reason too why people end up with autoimmune thyroid disorders. That there's fibrosis, and I'll get to how that's there, but there's fibrosis that prevents the hormone from even leaving the gland. And then the body's trying to clean up that mess, and that's where some of the antibody production comes. So let's go past that though. So maybe the hormone was produced and did leave the gland. The next thing it has to do is it has to be able to be converted. You produce the inactive form, it has to be converted. Well, that's, requires a liver that's functioning at great capacity, which also means that it's not burdened by toxicity, excess estrogen, excess serotonin, yes, excess serotonin, that you have enough stored glycogen to do that, which means, guys, you do thyroid treatment on a low-carb diet, just consider it a done deal. You're not converting hormone, which is why a lot of people then have to supplement T3, and even that's not going to work long-term if you don't solve that problem. Then, let's say the liver does do conversion. Then the hormone has to reach the cell. Well, here's the consequence, and we're going to go to the fibrosis picture. One of the reasons why so many people are hypothyroid is that we are inordinately stressed. And stress is a form of metabolic functioning that is meant for emergency situations. Which means, when you have to run from a bear, when you have to chase your food or your food is chasing you, you need to be able to respond. And so to do that, we have this beautiful system where we liberate from our own body tissues. We can cause a surge in blood sugar using cortisol. And cortisol, norepinephrine, epinephrine, they're all amazing for that. We get the surge so we can escape the event, right? Or we can go through small periods of high stress, but that's not the way we're living. We're living in these perpetual episodes of stress. Whether you feel that stress or not, I'm here to tell you I've never once evaluated a woman who wasn't displaying those effects extremely. Some more than others, but I will tell you that I've never found a case that wasn't already extreme. The inordinate effects of stress, whether it's the constant scrolling of Facebook, the constant demands on us, every woman who's ever gotten above a bachelor's degree, it's like a done deal. Having kids, navigating the modern world, it's all so much. We have no downtime. We have no unoccupied stillness time. We take that time and we exercise with it, which only raises the stress threshold even more. We're constantly trying to quote unquote better ourselves, often by taking on food habits that are actually only raising that stress. The reason why I point this out is because That elevated cortisol causes an elevation in estrogen, causes an elevation in serotonin. Yes, serotonin is a stress hormone. It's not the feel-good hormone, it's a stress hormone. And the results of all of that is that you block thyroid hormone's ability to act at the cell, you impair glucose regulation, you cause fibrosis, literally causing fibrosis around the cells in the extracellular matrix, blocking the ability of your own hormones to reach the cell, in addition to all your own nutrients and all of those essential factors of cellular health. And this over time gets worse and worse and worse and worse. Now, on top of that, all that accumulated estrogen is clogging the liver, which is impacting detoxification systems. And this just gets bigger and bigger and bigger as we go. So sometimes that hormone has been produced, like you're a lucky one, right? You produced the hormone, you converted the hormone, and then it arrives at the cell and it can't get there because the effects of chronic stress have created fibrosis in the extracellular matrix, making it impossible for the cell to be reached by the hormone. Now, let's say you even got lucky that time. But when the hormone tries to act at the cell, you discover that due to the effects of chronic stress, due to the fact that there isn't enough glucose inside the cell, due to the fact that the Krebs cycle has been damaged by polyunsaturated fats and excess cortisol and radiation, now you can't use that hormone either. This is the deal. This is why, you guys, you go do thyroid treatment. Let's talk about some common options there. Someone actually agrees to give you Synthroid, so they prescribe you T4. Maybe some of you are on T4. You give a person T4 without solving the mechanism of the stress response and the cell's response to it and the cell's use of energy and providing enough fuel. You have just done nothing. In fact, you may have made the stress worse because you give T4 to a liver that doesn't have enough glycogen. It can't convert it to T3. Now you've got an excess of T4. You give T4 to a person who's under consuming a balanced ratio of carbohydrates for their cellular system, and the cells aren't going to be able to use the Krebs cycle to make the energy that the thyroid promotes. And so the only response the body can have to that is, oh man, we got to keep raising the stress level. This is why it's so serious. You cannot just hand out thyroid even to people whose TSH is elevated if you haven't solved this other problem, because you haven't set the cells up for success. Now let's talk about armor. So some people get given armor and they think, yes, I got armor. You know, it's not just T4, it's got T3 in it. You're right, it can be a bit better, but the same parameters apply. If your cell's primary energy model is based off of cortisol and therefore fatty acid oxidation or fat oxidation, then what's going to happen is you're not going to be able to use the prompted energy of the thyroid. And I bring this up because this happens all the time. That people get given thyroid, they feel a little bit better temporarily, and then it all goes away. Or they stall out. And the reason is that giving thyroid, giving T3 to a person is a lot like pressing the accelerator in a good way. You're actually prompting the return of normal energy production. But if you haven't built up the system to be able to do that, meaning all the right cofactors for those chemical reactions, plenty of glucose, you've repaired the damage done by polyunsaturated fats, you've lowered the estrogen, you've lowered the cortisol. If you haven't done those things, it is a moot point because you cannot get the cells to respond. And this is what's happening all over the place. People are starting to hand out Armour thyroid like it's candy. You know, a lot of NDs, a lot of DOs, they're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna put you on thyroid, I'm gonna put you on thyroid. And they're not doing anything to repair the mechanism. Then you wonder, why aren't I getting better? Like, why did I get a little bit better and then it's not working? That's why. Now, some people say, oh, let's remedy that by just giving T3. Same scenario. You do a T3-based therapy and you haven't dealt with the excess estrogen production, the excess fibrosis, the excess serotonin, the excess cortisol. You guys are going to end up in the same spot. This is what has been missing. No one's looking past the thyroid to how do we get here in the first place? And there's a whole host of systems that need to be simultaneously dealt with. The core of it being, and most people are vastly under-consuming the right kind of carbohydrates to fuel the reactions that the thyroid demands. That's number one. Number two is that if you're eating polyunsaturated fats, forget it. Polyunsaturated fats destroy glucose regulation, they destroy thyroid management, and truly, they're going to wreck your health, and they're going to make it impossible to recover from any issues related to thyroid, inflammation, autoimmunity, chronic pain, anxiety, depression, gut issues. It's a moot point if you're consuming those fats. And I'm telling you, that means nuts, seeds in most people. Now, I'm not saying nuts and seeds are bad. I'm saying that in our stressed state, they push the button too far. But definitely like canola oil, sunflower oil, safflower oil, like all of those got to go. They are toxic as all get out. They are ruining our health. Now, if we, there's those factors. Now, let's just talk about stress. If you try to heal the thyroid and you're still driving, like you're going crazy, like there's someone chasing you every single day, you don't stop, you don't slow down, you're doing everything fast, you're going to the gym, you're running on the treadmill because you're thinking, yeah, more cardio, you're doing the Stairmaster, you're going to high intensity class, you're going to CrossFit. This is going to ruin your thyroid health. And I should know. That's how I tanked my thyroid to the extreme years ago. I was an avid CrossFitter. I CrossFitted for 2+ years, 4 days a week. I loved the challenge. Why? Because we freaking love adrenaline. That is our nature as humans. We love it. And I can talk another time about why that is, because it's very clear. But when we live that way, constantly scrolling Facebook, how many of you pick a time of day and you turn off that phone? Like 7 p.m. and done, never look at it again. Or how many of you are sitting there scrolling even when you climb in bed at night? How many of you pick it up the first thing in the morning? How many of you spend time just sitting in the sunshine outside every day? How many of you spend time doing absolutely nothing? I can venture a guess that most of you don't. Because when I ask my clients these questions, sometimes they're terrified at the thought of doing nothing. But I can tell you that we are driving ourselves into this pit. It is no wonder we have rising rates of cancer. It is no wonder we have rising rates of autoimmune disease, because these mechanisms drive that. If you don't have a functional system for thyroid, you are guaranteed to have at least one of the following: heart disease, diabetes, cancer, autoimmune issues, dementia in your lifetime. And the reason for that is that the thyroid governs the cellular systems. Now and like I said, you can't fix that by just taking some thyroid. That doesn't solve anything. You have to line up your food, your mind, your lifestyle, your emotions with that healing, or it's all going to be for nothing. And who wants to have swallowed a pill for most of their life for nothing? And the thing is it's not an adrenal therapy, because I always hear that. Oh, but I treated my adrenals. No, you didn't. The adrenals are only responding to the cellular signals. You want to treat the adrenals, you do this. Because you can't just tonify the adrenals and call it good, because they're going to keep producing depending on what the cell signal is. The adrenals are only responding to the messages that you've enacted in your body. Now, I know you didn't know you were enacting those messages. I'm just giving you the feedback that people always think they treat like, oh, my adrenals are fatigued, as if it happened like over here while they've been sitting in this chair. Didn't happen. Everything that we've been taught, so much of it lines up to make this scenario worse. So you guys, if this resonates with you and you want to talk more, cool, put something in the comments. But you need to know that you can't just take thyroid and even holding out for somebody to tell you that your TSH is finally high enough to give you thyroid. It doesn't matter, because that's not treatment. That's just giving you some hormone and actually raising the threat level in the body. And the truth is if it gets addressed for the complex whole body problem that it is, not only do you solve the thyroid problem and the energy problem and the metabolic issues, and you cut your risk for heart disease, you cut your risk for cancer, you raise your cognitive ability, you can heal your emotional issues. Like, you can do all of it if you do it this way. But trying to skip over it, God, I just want to take the pill, it's not going to work. And actually, I would hate to see more people led into that path thinking, oh, I finally got it, and you don't. Because your cells are so freaking cool. And the reality is that the stress state you're living in is something you inadvertently told your body was necessary. You didn't know it. No one had ever taught you. I venture a guess most of you, if someone had sat you down and really explained it, you would have shifted your patterns. But now most of us find ourselves in like a hole too big to just shift a few patterns and get out of it. That's why this gets so complex so fast. But it is healable. We can heal this. We can get the cells back to burning glucose. We can get the cells back to functioning happily. We can get the cells back to making and producing energy and responding to thyroid, and the mitochondria can be happy. And in return, you won't have inflammation. You know, your gut will be happy. The gut's all connected to this too, by the way. The more that this goes on, the more endotoxins in the gut, the more the feedback loop goes, the more thyroid is suppressed. It just gets big. That's why you can't I'm going to go treat my gut now. Can't do it. How do you treat an organ system at the center of your body in isolation with the rest of your cells? It doesn't work. That's why it has to be the whole body taken into consideration at all times in every situation. This is the new paradigm of healing. This is where healing is going to have to go. Because all these specialty centers, even in my profession, I'm a naturopathic medical doctor. There are naturopaths who say, oh, I'm a gut specialist. Cool. Except for the fact that that doesn't work. The whole body needs to be healed at all times. Physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. We are one beautiful, big, divine being, and we need to own it. And thyroid connects to all of it, which is why I'm here talking to you today, because I'm tired of people thinking, I just need to solve my thyroid problem. No, you don't. You need to solve an entire whole body energy problem that is based off of chronic stress so that you can have your life back and so that you can no longer have a thyroid problem or an inflammatory problem, or any of the other things that stem from it. You guys are worth it. Be kind to yourselves. Post in the comments. I'm always here. Set up a call if you want to talk more. But you deserve to know that everything in the body is linked. And thyroid is one of the biggest misconstrued subjects in medicine today. And you deserve the truth. Blessings, guys.